Conservative Party archive. Hannah is the archivist and the archive assistant. So our exhibition is a little bit about the Conservative Party conference we went to last year, 2025. I'm probably going to say this year a lot, but it was last year. But I'm going to start with a little bit of background about the Conservative Party archive and how it sits in the Bodleian, just so some people might not be familiar with it. So the Conservative Party archive has sat in the Bodleian since 1978. It is on deposit in the Bodleian, which means that the Bodleian does not own it. So anyone with a reader's card can access any open material, but any copyright decisions or any permissions need to be sought from the Conservative Party still. The oldest thing we have in our collection is the 1867 first conference minutes, but the vast majority dates from post-1945. A lot of material was lost during the Second World War paper salvage drives. It is a living archive, which means we're still collecting material, which you'll see a little bit at the end of the table there. Everything that's deposited has an automatic 30-year closure period. So one of our jobs every year is reopening everything that's essentially aged out of the closure period. So we just last year / the beginning of this year opened up everything from 1995. And there are a couple of collections that are permanently closed, for example, the Whip's office, and permission can be sought on an individual case-by-case basis. And then the last thing is, so we're funded by the Conservative Party Archive Trust, and they fund the 2 full-time staff positions. And then the last thing I need to say about that is, there's lots. Okay, so now you know about the archive. I'm going to start with our little pieces of interesting things here. So part of our job is outreach, and for us, one of the biggest dates in the calendar is the conference. So we go every year. Last year it was October, and me and Hannah had actually been in our posts less than 2 months apiece. So it was a little bit of a baptism by fire, but it was very good to go. And the theme for our exhibition was 100 Years of Margaret Thatcher. So there were several other bits of the conference that focused on Margaret Thatcher. There was the Maggie mosaic, where you could have your picture taken, and then that was added to another bigger picture of Margaret Thatcher's face. There were lots of cutouts of Margaret Thatcher about that you could have your photo taken with. And if you saw any press coverage of the conference at all, you would have seen her 3 outfits that were on display. So they were sat behind us, and normally we have a smaller exhibition sized stall, but this year we were given 3 cases to fill right at the entrance to the conference space, which is fantastic because it meant that we could just pull people into our orbit essentially, and we wanted to raise the profile of the archive within the party, partly because we want people who are interested in the Conservatives to use it, and partly because there will be people in that crowd who are generating material that we would like to enter into the archive. So right at the beginning of the exhibition space, we have her wonderful dresses behind us, and I would say about 80% of our conversations with members of the party started with, we don't actually own those dresses, they're not part of the archive, they belong to a private collector, but this material is the archive. And explaining that it's the party archive rather than an individual collection of Margaret Thatcher's items, although the Bodleian does have some major Conservative individual collections, so for example Edward Heath and Harold Macmillan, but this is just Margaret Thatcher's interaction with the party. So we had 3 cases. The first case, and this is just a selection, is her beginning of her career with the party, essentially. Just as a side note, all of the material here is the original, but the material we took up to the conference were facsimiles generated by the fantastic in-house Bodleian imaging team, and that was just because of the security arrangements up there, we couldn't guarantee it, but this here is all the original material. So we start off with, she's left university, where she graduated with a degree in chemistry, and she decides she wants to stand as a candidate in Dartford. So the first item there is a report on her outstanding behaviour and reputation. There's a fantastic little story where the neighbouring cinema owner thought there'd been a fire evacuation because there were so many people spilling out of her meeting hall, but it was just people who were interested in seeing her speak. We have a little picture of her on her wedding day, which was a fantastic tie-in with her outfits that were behind us, because obviously that was her at the peak of her identity as the Prime Minister, and that's her right at the beginning. And then we have 3 letters that she's written to constituency leaders here. In the first letter, she's just had the twins, which she writes came as a bit of a surprise. But she needs 6 months before she could possibly stand as a candidate again, or she gets her house in order. Less than 6 months later, we have another letter where she's decided, possibly quite sensibly, that she doesn't want to pursue politics, and actually she's going to go for law instead, which she does successfully do, and she becomes a taxation lawyer instead. And then we know that that's not where her career with the party ended, but she writes another letter after she's been successfully adopted as a candidate, writing about the anti-woman sentiment that is still within the party. Like I said, we know that's not the end of her career with the party. She then stands again for Finchley and is successfully voted in as a Member of Parliament. And so she spends the next decade essentially building her profile within the party. We have a nice thought piece here by her, What's Wrong with Politics, in case anyone's ever wanted to know. And we also have her brochure, where she is promoting herself to members of her constituency. We all get them through our letterbox, even today, saying this is what I've done, this is who I am, this is why you should vote for me. That booklet also has ones from other parties as well. It's not exclusively Conservative. During this time, she was the
Secretary for Education.
Thank you very much as well. So she is taking on other roles within the party. She's not just standing individually as an MP. And then our third and final case focused on her at the peak of her success, so from 1975 onwards, where she's first elected as the leader of the party and then becomes Prime Minister. So we have a lovely image here of her with a cake, and one of the nicest things about being at the conference is that we get to engage with people who are connected with these items. These are obviously not quite as modern as last week's videos, but they're still living history. And the gentleman who had organised that cake for her came up and told us all about it. So that's our original label from the exhibition, and it states that it was for winning the general election, but actually he came and told us it was for her birthday, which was 6 months before. So now we know that little bit extra piece of information about it. We have the monthly news from the Conservative Party's press office announcing her as leader and talking about how she's going straight into her programme. We also have a press release as well relating to that. So that was our exhibition, and again, part of our role is outreach, and so not only engaging people with the items but with the concept of us as an archive. I think another miscommunication that we came up again with a lot of people was this idea that we're all on display all the time like a museum, and that they could pop in and look at things, which they can do, but we just had to explain about it being part of a library, that they have to get a reader's card, that we're really happy to help people with doing that, but you need to essentially go through that rather than popping into a museum with cases. But because we're a living archive, and part of our role, not only with educating people, was to collect material that will enter the archive as well. So we took an approach of just collecting everything, and then when we came back, we had a look and see what fitted in with the collection policy. So we have 3 items here that are going to stay within the collection. So we have the handbook, a Conservative Environmental Network brochure, so that's a smaller group within the party, and then also the National Convention Handbook for 2025, which has Margaret Thatcher's face on it as well. So that's also just a nice record of the theme of the conference that she was there. And then all of this other material at the end is a little bit more of the fun stuff I collected. So party conferences of all political parties, they're a fantastic place for lobbyists, interest groups, even businesses to get access to the politicians and the parties that are making government policy. One individual who was working for a charity described it as the Oscars for lobbyists, which I really liked. So they just get access that they wouldn't ordinarily get. So it's a really interesting place to see who's there, what message they're trying to send to people, and how they're going about it. Because as well as all the MPs, there are just regular members of the public who are members of the party who they're looking to influence as well. So a little bit of that is reflected here in that material. I think, actually, that's everything.